Diana Ross once called Michael Jackson her baby. And in return, Michael once admitted Diana Ross is my mother, my lover, and my friend all blended into one. When Michael Jackson said those words, the world stood still. Not because they sounded poetic, but because they felt so real. So real, it left people unsettled. How could one woman be a mother, a lover, and a soulmate to a man who spent his life searching for unconditional love? That wasn't just a statement. It was the cry of a child who never truly grew up, who once poured his entire heart into a woman named Diana Ross. But what was that feeling really? An unrequited love, a forbidden romance, or a secret that no one has dared to name? Before Michael passed, he left behind one final clue, something no one expected, and it might just be the ultimate confirmation. Are you ready to know the truth? The fateful meeting of 1969. There are moments in music history that seem small at first, yet later become the key to understanding a life both monumental and tragic. When Michael Jackson first met Diana Ross in 1969, the world had no idea it was witnessing the beginning of one of the most haunting and persistent relationships in the entertainment industry. It wasn't just the meeting of a child prodigy and the reigning queen of Motown. It was the moment an 11-year-old boy found the woman who would forever become the symbol of longing, unrequited love, and unspoken sorrow. That year, the Jackson 5 had just signed with Motown, America's most powerful record label at the time, led by Berry Gordy. Though Michael was already 11, he was marketed as 9 to boost his prodigy appeal. Meanwhile, 25-year-old Diana Ross was at the peak of her fame, having just launched her solo career after leaving the Supremes. Gordy, a PR mastermind and Diana's romantic partner, knew the Jackson 5's debut needed emotional weight and star power. And so he crafted a legend Diana Ross discovered the Jackson 5. In truth, Gordy had chosen the group after watching a tape and saw something in Michael that gave him chills. James Brown's energy, Sammy Davis Jr.'s stage control, and a strange innocence that couldn't be taught. But since Diana carried immense influence, he asked her to present the group on national television to introduce them to the world. She did with a radiant smile, tender eyes, and a soft hand on Michael's tiny shoulder. What no one expected was what came after. The entire Jackson 5 parents and all moved from Indiana to California to pursue their careers. While waiting for their permanent home, they lived in Diana Ross's Los Angeles mansion. 1 year may be short for adults, but to a child undergoing emotional development, it's an entire world. And Michael's world would never be the same again. In that house, Diana wasn't just a host, she became a surrogate mother, a spiritual mentor, and something more. Michael began calling her mother, but also at times girlfriend. His biological mother, Katherine Jackson, later confirmed in her memoir that Michael once told sisters LaToya and Janet they weren't pretty until they looked like Diana Ross. At 11, Michael didn't just idolize Diana. He idealized her as the perfect woman, unreachable beauty, radiant gentleness, and a goddess-like presence he longed to possess or become. Michael was captivated by her every gesture. He watched how she walked, how she smiled, how she engaged with the public, and how she seemed to make everyone else feel small beside her. In his eyes, Diana Ross wasn't merely a woman, she was perfection incarnate. She was the living embodiment of everything Michael had never known: tenderness, encouragement, and light. Diana, single and enormously famous at the time, also showed Michael rare affection. She cared for him, held his hand during public appearances, and spoke of him with pride as though he were her own son. Their closeness raised eyebrows within Motown, but since Michael was still a child, no one paid serious attention. But to Michael, every hug, every compliment from Diana was magic. Years later, Michael would say, "Diana Ross is my mother, my lover, my friend, all rolled into one." This wasn't a careless line. It was the truth of someone who never truly understood the boundaries between kinds of love, because his childhood was a painful void. He never had a normal youth, never experienced a real adolescence, and was never allowed to just be a child. From age 5, he was on stage trained like a hit-making machine, under the harsh rule of his father, Joe Jackson, who was infamous for being violent and cold. Diana Ross in some way became the only refuge that the young genius could call safe. That love didn't fade over time, it only transformed. From admiration to infatuation, to an obsession Michael would carry for the rest of his life. As he grew older, he didn't seek someone like Diana, he sought Diana. Though he later dated Madonna Brooke Shields and married Lisa Marie Presley. In his heart, there was always only one person seated there. And so that meeting in 1969, which seemed like just another PR move by Motown, became the entry point into a lifelong emotional labyrinth. A boy walked in with wonder in his eyes, and a man walked out carrying within him an obsession that would never find closure. When affection crosses the line. Michael's feelings for Diana Ross, though beginning as pure admiration, quickly broke beyond the boundaries of maternal love, friendship, or professional camaraderie. As he grew older, the way he looked at Diana was no longer that of a boy, gazing at an ideal mother figure. It was the gaze of a man who had fallen for the woman he once saw as everything. And what followed in the early years of his adulthood became undeniable proof that their relationship had gone further than the public had ever known or wanted to believe. In 1977, Michael Jackson was only 19 years old. He had just shed the image of the adorable youngest of the Jackson 5 and was entering the phase of discovering his identity as a solo artist. Around the same time, he was cast in the film The Wiz. A black reinterpretation of The Wizard of Oz, and his co-star was none other than Diana Ross, then 33, in her prime, both in beauty and power. During the filming in New York, amidst long shooting days, sleepless nights, and creative pressure, Michael and Diana's relationship became more apparent than ever, no longer that of a mentor and a child under her wing. One particular incident stirred whispers among the crew. Diana was rumored to have spent the night at Michael's apartment. Her personal assistant, usually meticulous with her schedule, couldn't find her the next morning, until a call to Michael's apartment confirmed she was still there with him. When rumors started circulating on set, Diana simply smiled and offered a remark meant to soothe, but filled with subtext. "Let me tell you one thing. Michael is definitely not gay." That sentence was like a key unlocking the door everyone had been pretending not to see, that there was something deeper than innocent affection between them. Diana, ever the master of image control, neither denied nor confirmed anything. As for Michael, when asked what had happened that night, he smiled and said, "You'll have to ask her." When the press turned to Diana, she responded, "You'll have to ask Michael." Both kept their silence in a way that only fueled public speculation. And within that ambiguity, people could sense that intimacy between them was no longer in question. It had already happened. If that night was a spark, then what followed was a slow-burning flame that smoldered in Michael's heart for years. Not long after, the Wiz Michael proposed to Diana not once, but twice. The first time, according to close sources, she said yes. For a brief period, they shared what some described as a private engagement known only to their closest circle. The clearest sign of this came at the American Music Awards in 1984. That night, Diana appeared wearing a dazzling ring gifted by none other than Michael. When he stepped on stage to accept an award, Diana didn't hesitate to kiss him on the lips in front of millions of TV viewers, something never before seen between two artists long regarded as merely close like siblings. She then lifted his face as if wanting the world to see the ring. It was no longer just encouragement, no longer just affection. It was a statement, a silent declaration of a love never officially acknowledged. But that boldness didn't last. When Michael shared the engagement news with his mother, Katherine Jackson, he was met with furious disapproval. She was reportedly furious, calling Diana too old, inappropriate, and even expressing concern that the relationship would tarnish her son's wholesome image. In a deeply religious and conservative family like the Jacksons, the idea of their 25-year-old son loving a woman 14 years his senior one who had once acted as a surrogate mother was hard to accept. Pressure from family media and public opinion began to close in. Diana, ever sensitive to public perception and deeply protective of her career, began to hesitate. She understood that going too far with Michael wasn't just an emotional risk, it was a branding risk. She was an icon, a standard, and she could not allow herself to become the subject of tabloids calling her a cradle robber or a queen manipulating a young idol. Not long after, Diana quietly withdrew from the relationship. Though she had once accepted his proposal, She chose to end things without fanfare. Michael said nothing, but he didn't have to. All of his emotions, pain, heartbreak, disappointment, were distilled into his music. And from that moment on, his unfulfilled love began to transform into an obsession he carried until the very end of his life. Their relationship, once ambiguous, had now turned into a quiet fracture, one that left him yearning and aching for the rest of his days. And it all began the moment those feelings crossed the line, no longer innocent, no longer pure, but a kind of love that was forbidden, concealed, and destined never to be fulfilled. Diana marries someone else. Michael responds through music. No one knows exactly what truly happened between Michael Jackson and Diana Ross. But if there's one thing for certain, it's this. Michael loved her in a way that no one else could truly understand. Deeply, intensely, and full of contradiction. Throughout his formative years, from the time he lived in Diana's mansion to when he became the king of pop, Diana remained an irreplaceable figure in Michael's inner world. And when that relationship could go no further, Michael chose the only way he knew to respond, turning his broken heart into music. In 1985, Diana Ross announced her marriage to Arne Næss Jr., a Norwegian-German businessman, known for his ventures in shipping and mountaineering. The marriage caught Western media by surprise. But for Michael, it was perhaps the moment he was forced to confront the reality that the dream named Diana, the woman he once called my mother, my friend and my lover, would never come true. There was no angry outburst from Michael, no bitter statement to the press, but those close to him said he was deeply saddened. He didn't attend the wedding, nor did he send congratulations. In his autobiography, Moonwalk, published in 1988, Michael wrote that he always loved Diana and always will, a confession both tender and painful, as if that love had never been fully acknowledged nor ever set free. Around that time, Michael wrote and recorded one of the most controversial songs of his career, Dirty Diana, 1987, featured on the Bad album. The song tells the story of a mysterious, seductive woman who lures rock stars and disrupts their personal lives. Its dark, urgent melody and lyrics brim with anger, hurt, and even resentment. Immediately, the song title led audiences to associate it with Diana Ross. Michael denied it, claiming the song was about a type of obsessed fan who follows musicians around. But people weren't easily convinced. The reason wasn't just the name, it was the raw emotion dripping from every lyric. She said that she's got a thing for me, and I'm the one she needs. She likes the boys in the band she knows when they come to town. Western media erupted with speculation. Was this Michael's way of expressing his pain after Diana Ross? The woman he idolized since childhood left his embrace for another man. Insiders, including Quincy Jones, Michael's legendary producer, admitted concern that the song would be interpreted as being about Diana Ross. He reportedly urged Michael to alter the lyrics, steering the narrative toward a fangirl, rather than a real person named Diana. Quincy later confirmed that the original lyrics were far more direct and personal. He persuaded Michael to incorporate the image of a crazed female fan to deflect public suspicion and protect Diana's reputation, someone Michael still cared deeply for. Despite those efforts, Diana Ross was said to have reacted negatively to the song. Some accounts say she cut off contact with Michael for a time after the track's release, signaling her anger and pain. Yet as time passed, the invisible thread between them seemed impossible to sever. Rumors spread that Diana later used Dirty Diana as part of an intro in one of her performances, a subtle reclaiming of the narrative, or perhaps a gesture of reconciliation. However, there is no official recording to confirm this. The name Diana in the title may have been a coincidence, or it may not. But what's clear is this: the emotion Michael poured into Dirty Diana was real. The pain was real. The heartbreak was real. And the rage was real. If Billie Jean was a punch thrown at the media, and Man in the Mirror was a cry for self-reflection, then Dirty Diana was a whisper of fury directed at one person, a real person whom the world admired, but Michael remembered with unresolved longing. Perhaps Diana Ross was never truly his. Perhaps she was only an icon, an untouchable goddess, a symbol of everything he yearned for, but never possessed. But in Michael's heart, no one else ever reigned for as long. And when Diana married, what shattered wasn't just hope. It was the imagined world of a man forever abandoned by the very things he loved most. And for that reason, Dirty Diana wasn't just a song, it was a farewell, or worse, a curse. The Shrine, to Diana Ross, inside Neverland. When someone loves another so deeply that they cannot have them, that love does not disappear. It transforms into a part of their living space, seeps into every corner of their everyday life, becomes a silent ritual, almost a religion. For Michael Jackson, Diana Ross was not merely the woman he once loved, but the most sacred figure in his inner world, a world full of wounds, longing, and loneliness. That love over time was preserved by Michael in his own way, not with roses or love letters, but with thousands of photos, candles, and a secret room in Neverland Ranch, the only love shrine he ever built for a woman. Neverland was not just a residence, it was a kingdom Michael created to replace the childhood that had been stolen from him. With a zoo amusement park movie theater and fairy tale gardens, it was like a separate realm detached from reality and hidden deep inside behind doors, not open to all guests, was a small room next to his master bedroom. It was there, according to friends, assistants, and even business partners like Pepsi, that Michael set up a private sanctuary entirely devoted to the image of Diana Ross. The room was lit by thousands of candles burning day and night. The warm yellow glow danced across walls covered in photos of Diana from her days in the Supremes to her radiant solo career. Pictures of her wearing a crown, dressed in glamorous gowns, smiling on red carpets, all meticulously arranged, reverently displayed as if in a temple. On the altar, small statues carved in her likeness, gold-framed portraits sometimes accompanied by fresh flowers or hand-embroidered handkerchiefs. Why candles? According to a close friend of Michael as a child, he had once heard from an Obaya priest, a form of African folk spirituality, that if you placed the photo of someone you loved between lit candles and kept them burning, that person would never leave you. Michael, who lived more by intuition and faith than logic, followed that advice his entire life. It wasn't superstition, it was desperation, turned ritual. Several Pepsi staff members during a visit to Neverland for a marketing campaign were once given a tour of the estate. When they accidentally walked into that room, they were stunned into silence. A space so private, so sacred, it made outsiders feel like they had trespassed into something forbidden. We looked around and realized this wasn't a memorabilia room. It wasn't a display room. This was a holy place, one of them recalled. They were all promptly asked to leave. Perhaps that very room was where Michael would retreat to whenever he was wounded, when his marriage with Lisa Marie Presley fell apart, when fleeting romances failed to fill the void, when the world accused him, mocked him, twisted his image. In the dark, lit only by candlelight, it was just him and the image of Diana Ross. No words, no touch, but no departure either. That love wasn't confined to a single room. It seeped into his music. In the Remember the Time 1992 music video, one of Michael's most elaborate productions set in ancient Egypt, he appears as the secret lover of a queen portrayed by model Iman. While the public saw a romantic fantasy, Jermaine Jackson, Michael's brother, later confirmed that the video wasn't about some imaginary queen. It was about Diana, and it's easy to understand. Michael once referred to Diana Ross as a goddess. In his mind, she was mother lover and the embodiment of unreachable perfection. Other women in his life, Madonna, Brooke Shields, Debbie Rowe, were never given that kind of reverence. None were worshipped like she was. None were named in his will like she was. And none were present in his living space in so sacred a way. Michael never married Diana Ross. They had no children, no publicly shared memories, no visible bonds beyond music and memory. But in Michael's heart, Diana occupied a temple, not just in Neverland, but in his very spirit. That room of 1,000 candles may be gone, but her image to Michael never left. Even after his death, his will still bore her name. And when a man entrusts his children to a woman who is neither wife nor sister nor friend, it is no longer mere love. It is reverence. It is faith. And Neverland held for him one of life's most sacred secrets. A secret that never needed words, only the flicker of a burning flame. love control, and silent jealousies. Michael Jackson may have been the biggest star on the planet, but when standing before Diana Ross, he was not the king of pop. He was a man who had never let go of his first love, caught in a whirlwind of hope and disappointment. Though they were no longer a couple if they ever were, Diana and Michael maintained a complicated relationship woven between friendship, love dependency, and at times, emotional power. They may not have lived together, may not have loved each other in a conventional way, but they had never truly separated. And it was precisely this ambiguity that made Michael's love feel both sacred and shadowed. After Diana married Arna Ness Jr., many assumed she and Michael would drift apart, but the opposite proved true. Leaked stories from behind the scenes revealed she continued to appear every time he seemed ready to move on. When Michael publicly began dating Madonna, one of the most influential women in music, at the time Diana Ross reportedly showed up at an event and sat directly on Michael's lap. That act wasn't random. It was a declaration, a signal that said, "I'm still here." On another occasion, when Elizabeth Taylor, one of Michael's rare confidants, stepped on stage to comfort him. During an event, Diana intervened, took Michael's hand, and even attempted to push Liz aside. Both were powerful women, both Hollywood icons, but only one held sway over Michael that he never dared deny. Despite being a grown man, wealthy, famous with the world at his feet, Michael still could not say no to Diana Ross. Even at major award shows like the American Music Awards, when Michael appeared alongside Brooke Shields, his rumored former girlfriend Diana would stir chaos on stage. As Michael walked up to accept an award, she blew kisses, endlessly, rushed up to grab his hand, and smiled as if the entire world behind the cameras was merely their private audience. On another occasion, she even forgot her speech because she was too fixated on his presence. Though accustomed to the spotlight and public displays in those moments, Michael could not hide his disappointment. He once said that Diana would never commit to me, but she also wouldn't let me go. To him, it was a vicious cycle, where he was never fully loved, but never allowed to fully love someone else. It was this sense of being controlled within an unclear emotional dynamic that caused Michael deep inner conflict. He always hoped Diana would love him as a man, but she continued calling him my son, little Michael, and my dear friend. In a 1991 interview with the Rock Hill Herald, Diana admitted, "When Michael wants to see me, he will. When he doesn't, he shuts every door and disappears." But perhaps the reverse was also true. When Diana wanted in, she always found a way back into his life regardless of where he was or who he was with. Michael himself once bitterly remarked, "She acts like she wants fame and money more than love." He didn't accuse, but those words carried deep disappointment. He felt like just one part of Diana's larger picture, a picture where she was always the centerpiece, and everyone else merely orbiting satellites. And among all the women who passed through his life, only Diana was someone Michael never truly held, but also never let go. He could divorce, sever ties, or remain silent with others, but never with her. Despite being hurt, abandoned, rejected, he still allowed her to step into Neverland, into his heart, and even into his final will. Perhaps that very love was why Diana Ross was named as the second guardian of Michael's 3 children right after his mother. A woman he never married, never lived with, but who remained an inseparable part of every major life and legacy decision he made. To the world, it was a relationship full of lore. To Michael, it was a love that never died, but also a love that never truly lived. And like every classic tragedy, it was that very incompleteness that made it endure eternally, both in the public's memory and in the heart of the man who loved her until his final breath. The final will, the secret Michael kept for Diana Ross. On July 7, 2009, at the Staples Center, millions tuned in to watch Michael Jackson's memorial service on live television, waiting to hear from family, friends, and those who helped shape his legacy. One face everyone expected to appear, but was completely absent, was Diana Ross. Her silence shocked the world, but few knew that a far more important secret had quietly surfaced in the dry, formal pages of a legal document Michael had named her in his final will in a role no one could have imagined. In the will signed on July 7, 2002, exactly 7 years before the memorial, Michael Jackson wrote explicitly, if his mother, Katherine Jackson, were unable to care for his 3 children, Prince Paris and blanket guardianship would go to Diana Ross. This decision stunned even those closest to Michael. In his final years, he was rarely seen with Diana. Publicly, they no longer interacted, and she did not attend his funeral, at least not in front of cameras. Yet her name remained written in black ink on white paper, in the most legally binding document of his life. This indicated that of all Michael's relationships, no matter how many surrounded him, Lisa, Marie Brooke, Shields, Madonna, Elizabeth Taylor, or anyone else, only Diana Ross held the absolute trust to raise his children in the event of his death. Why Diana Michael never explained. But the answer may lie in the entire emotional journey he had with her, from love obsession to unwavering trust. To Michael, perhaps only 2 women ever truly protected him in the way a mother and ideal woman could: Katherine Jackson, his biological mother, and Diana Ross, his spiritual mother, his unfulfilled love. How did Diana Ross respond to this decision? In a brief statement after the will was revealed, she wrote, "I may not speak at this time, because this loss is too great, but I believe Michael knew I was always there for him. If needed, I will fulfill the duty he entrusted to me." The statement was short, yet filled with implication. It neither denied nor confirmed explicitly that she would assume responsibility for Michael's children, but it showed that something still existed between them, an unspoken pact without contracts or appearances. A trust that spanned more than 40 years, enduring beyond heartbreak, jealousy, marriage, and distance. Many commentators believe naming Diana Ross in the will was not merely a legal decision. It was Michael's final affirmation to the world and to her that she had always been the most important person in his life, not just in love, but in trust. It was no longer blind adoration, but the culmination of a lifetime searching for someone who could replace a mother, yet still be the one I love. Notably, Michael did not leave Diana any assets, shares, or luxury items in the will, but he entrusted her with something far more valuable: his 3 children, the ones who carried his bloodline, his memories, and his future. To Michael, that was his true legacy. Another striking detail in the will is the complete omission of his biological father, Joe Jackson, the man once seen as his controller and disciplinarian since childhood. Excluding his father while elevating a woman not related by blood to the highest position was a clearer emotional declaration than any interview could provide. And perhaps that was the final secret Michael wished to keep for himself until his last breath, that even though he could not live with Diana Ross, never be officially recognized as her lover, husband, or life partner, he loved her enough to entrust her with a part of his very being. It was a love that needed no name, no possession, only complete faith. A will may be written by lawyers, but Diana Ross's name in it was a decision from the heart. And for Michael Jackson, a man who lived as a child, who never grew up forever longing to love and be loved properly, that was his final answer. If this story gave you goosebumps like it did for us, don't just scroll past, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and never miss another untold truth about the world's greatest music legends.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.